I'm Dr. Richard, and I've been practicing medicine for over 4 decades. In that time, I've stood beside my patients through their strongest moments and their most fragile ones. But there's one condition I've witnessed again and again in older adults, something no prescription can cure: loneliness. It doesn't stem from aging itself or from illness. It comes from small habits, subtle, silent patterns that slowly push others away. Most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening until the damage is already done. And the truth is, I've seen this far more often than I'd like. But I've also seen what happens when people become aware, when they begin to make small changes that can bring back connection, peace, and joy. So today, I want to walk you through the 10 habits I've seen rob people of the very thing they need most in their later years: meaningful human connection. And more importantly, how we can turn that around. I once had a patient, Helen, 74 years old, a brilliant woman. She used to teach literature, had a sharp mind and a love for poetry that lit up every room. But over the years, something shifted. Every time I visited, our conversations drifted into the same rhythm: complaints about the weather, frustration with the news, disappointment in how kids these days behaved. At first, it seemed harmless, just harmless venting. But slowly, I noticed the energy in the room change. Her family began shortening their visits. Neighbors stopped dropping by, not because they didn't love her, but because they were emotionally exhausted. You see, no one walks away from a conversation hoping to feel worse than when they started. Negativity is heavy, it pulls people down, and over time, it becomes a barrier, one that keeps warmth, laughter, and love out. Helen didn't realize it. She thought she was just being honest, telling it like it is. But what she didn't see was how her words were shaping the emotional climate around her, turning her home into a place people avoided rather than ran toward. The truth is, life can be frustrating. Aging comes with aches and losses. But when negativity becomes the default lens through which we see the world, we don't just push others away, we isolate ourselves. The good news? Helen changed. It started with one simple practice, beginning each day with a single moment of gratitude. "The sun felt good on my face this morning," she'd say, or "my granddaughter's laugh stuck with me all day yesterday." And you know what happened? People lingered longer. Conversations grew lighter. The door that once felt closed began to open again. Positivity is magnetic. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means choosing not to let the hard parts of life define every interaction. And in Helen's case, that choice made all the difference. I remember another patient, Margaret. She was once the kind of woman who turned heads, not out of vanity, but because of the quiet confidence she carried. She had her signature perfume, a love for silk scarves, and a way of brushing her hair that made her feel like herself, no matter the day. But somewhere along the way, those habits began to fade. It didn't happen all at once. First, she skipped a hair appointment. Then she started wearing the same house clothes day in and day out. "What's the point?" she told me once, with a shrug. "I'm not going anywhere. No one's coming to see me." But what Margaret didn't realize was that this wasn't just about clothes or makeup. It was about identity, about self-worth. And slowly, the less she saw herself, the less others seemed to see her too. Invitations became fewer, her posture softened, and when she looked in the mirror, she no longer recognized the woman who once greeted the world with light in her eyes. You don't have to dress up like it's a gala every morning, but putting on a clean, well-fitting shirt, brushing your hair, and perhaps wearing a touch of something that makes you feel good, a scent, a necklace, a favorite color, that's not just for others, it's for you. It's a way of saying, I still matter, I'm still me. Because the truth is, how we present ourselves to the world often reflects how we feel on the inside. And when we begin to neglect the outer care, the inner self starts to fade with it. Margaret decided to make a change. It started with something simple, wearing her favorite lavender cardigan again. The next week she put on her earrings, just because. When I saw her again, she was smiling more, sitting up straighter. She told me, "I forgot how nice it feels to feel like myself again." There's power in that. not for appearance's sake, but because the way we show up for ourselves sets the tone for how we move through the world. And when you feel good in your own skin, the world tends to meet you with more warmth in return. And so if you've caught yourself slipping into habits of invisibility, let this be a gentle nudge. You deserve to be seen. But first, you have to see yourself again. There was a man I used to visit, Walter. He was 81, a retired engineer with a brilliant mind and a memory like a steel trap. But his house, it was drowning. Stacks of newspapers lined the walls like insulation, closets bursting with jackets from decades past, shelves filled with knickknacks, dusty birthday cards, boxes of cables from electronics long obsolete. I asked him once, "Walter, do you still need all of this?" He looked at me, eyes slightly clouded, and said, "Maybe. Some of it reminds me of when life felt full." And that's when I understood. The clutter wasn't laziness or neglect. It was longing. Every object was tethered to a moment, a person, a feeling, a time when things made more sense. Letting go of the object felt, to Walter, like letting go of the memory, like admitting time had passed, and some things would never come back. But what he couldn't see was that these things, though once meaningful, were now quietly weighing him down. His home had become a museum of loss rather than a place of peace. Every step around the clutter was a step through grief, and it was exhausting him, physically, mentally, emotionally. We often keep things just in case, or because one day I might need it. But more often, we hold on because we're afraid of what it means to release the past. We think letting go is betrayal when, in fact, it's an invitation to make space for something new. Eventually, Walter allowed me and his granddaughter to help. One drawer at a time, one box per weekend. We didn't throw out everything, we kept the meaningful, but we let go of the excess, and something remarkable happened. His home got lighter, but more importantly, so did he. He started inviting friends over again. He spent less time searching for things and more time being present. You see, memories don't live in objects. They live in you. They live in your stories, in your laughter, in the way you show up for the people around you today. When you make space in your home, you also make space in your heart, for peace, for presence, and for the joy that still wants to find you. Sometimes, in order to carry what matters most, we have to set down what we no longer need. I still remember a woman named Elaine. She was in her late 70s, once a nurse, the kind of woman who raised 4 children, held down 2 jobs, and never once asked for help. She was proud of that, fiercely independent, capable. But age has a way of humbling us, not because it defeats us, but because it reminds us that strength looks different in every season of life. Elaine had started struggling with simple things, carrying groceries, reaching high cabinets, even keeping up with her medication schedule. But every time someone offered assistance, a neighbor, a family member, even me, she smiled and said, "No, thank you. I'm fine." Except she wasn't. What she didn't see was that her refusal wasn't just isolating her, it was quietly hurting the people who loved her. Her daughter once told me with tears in her eyes, "I just wish she'd let me in. I don't want to take over her life, I just want to be part of it." You see, asking for help doesn't mean giving up control. It means inviting someone to walk beside you. It means trusting that allowing others to care for you isn't weakness, it's connection. And there's something else. Letting others help gives them purpose too. When you allow someone to open a door for you, carry a heavy bag, or sit with you through a doctor's appointment, you're not being a burden. You're giving them the chance to show up for you, just as you once did for others. Eventually, Elaine shifted. Slowly, she let her grandson help her set up her phone. She let a neighbor bring over soup when she wasn't feeling well. And you know what surprised her most? Not the convenience, but the warmth. The way her house began to feel full again. The way her heart did too. There's a quiet kind of courage in admitting, "I could use a hand," and there's grace in receiving without guilt. Because aging doesn't mean becoming less, it means learning to lean into interdependence. Not "I do everything alone," not "I give everything away," but we help each other carry the load. You spent a lifetime showing up for others. Maybe now it's time to let them return the gift. It's easy to lose our patience as we age. The world moves faster, technology changes daily, and our bodies no longer respond the way they once did. Tasks that used to take minutes now take effort, coordination, sometimes even courage. And amid all of that, frustration starts to creep in, not just with ourselves, but with the people around us. I remember one morning in the hospital, an early shift, a long night, and a tired nurse barely into her 20s. She was new, nervous, and in the rush of preparing a patient's IV, she dropped the needle. I snapped. The words came out sharp and fast. But what stayed with me wasn't the mistake. It was the look in her eyes. Fear. Embarrassment. Defeat. That look made me pause, because I knew in that moment that I had forgotten one of the most essential qualities of this profession and of being human: patience. You see, impatience often isn't about others. It's a mirror. It reflects our own discomfort with change, with slowness, with losing a bit of the control we once held so easily. But when we let that frustration take the lead, it doesn't just damage our relationships, it hardens us. It makes us bitter instead of wise, isolated instead of respected. I've seen it many times: older adults scolding a cashier for being too slow, huffing at a grandchild who can't figure something out, or criticizing a caregiver trying their best. And each time it chips away at the warmth that once defined those connections. But here's the truth: no one is asking us to be perfect. They're asking us to be present, with grace, with understanding, and yes, with patience. When you feel that edge rising inside, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is this really about them, or is it about me struggling to adapt to a new rhythm? The next time I saw that young nurse, I apologized. She smiled, hesitantly at first, but I could see relief wash over her, and in that moment, I didn't just redeem a mistake, I rebuilt trust. Patience isn't about being passive. It's about being generous with your time, your tone, and your expectations, especially toward those who are trying. And let's not forget, we too were once learning. We too once dropped things, misunderstood things, and asked for forgiveness. The world doesn't need us to move faster. It needs us to model what calm looks like in a chaotic age. And that begins with choosing patience, not because we're old and should know better, but because we're wise enough to lead with kindness. It's something I've seen time and time again: older adults dismissing the experiences of younger generations, not out of cruelty, but out of habit, out of nostalgia, out of the belief that somehow our time was more real, more meaningful, more grounded. And I understand it. When you've lived through wars, recessions, handwritten letters, and Sunday dinners without phones on the table, it's easy to look at the world today and feel like something sacred has been lost. But here's the hard truth. When we talk down to younger people, when we mock their music, their slang, their technology, or say things like "kids these days," we're not passing down wisdom. We're building walls. I once treated a grandfather who constantly complained that his grandson wouldn't talk to him anymore. "All he does is stare at that screen," he'd say. But when I asked if he'd ever asked the boy what he was doing on that screen, he shook his head. "Why should I? It's all nonsense." And there it was, that subtle dismissal, the kind that tells a young person, your world doesn't matter. What we forget is that every generation has its own language, its own fears, its own way of seeking meaning, and just because it looks different doesn't make it less valuable. What changed for that grandfather wasn't a speech, it was a question. The next time his grandson sat down with his game console, he asked, "Can you show me how it works?" That one question transformed everything. The boy lit up, eager to teach. The two sat together for nearly an hour, laughing, fumbling with controls, learning, and for the first time in a long while, they weren't just family, they were connected. Curiosity is the bridge, judgment is the barrier. When you choose to ask instead of criticize, to listen instead of dismiss, You become someone they want to talk to, someone they can trust. We often fear that we're losing touch with the world, but sometimes we're the ones letting go by refusing to reach across the gap. And it's not just about them, it's about us too. Staying curious keeps our minds flexible, our hearts open, our relationships alive. You don't have to understand every meme or app or trend. You just have to care enough to ask. Because when you meet a young person where they are, you're not just making room for their world. You're showing them that you still belong in it. There's a weight I've seen people carry into old age, not in their bones, but in their hearts. You can't see it on an X-ray, but you feel it in the room. It's in the tightness of their voice when they mention a sibling they haven't spoken to in years, the silence that follows a story they refuse to finish, the way their eyes dim when they talk about what should have been, resentment, regret. They come in different forms. An old betrayal, a bitter divorce, a friend who disappeared when you needed them most. Maybe you were right to be hurt. Maybe you were even right to walk away. But years later, that wound, untended, has turned into something far more dangerous. A wall. I've seen patients who couldn't sleep, who carried tension in their chest, who felt alone in rooms full of family. Because somewhere along the line, they chose to protect the pain instead of releasing it. But here's what I've learned over decades of listening. Holding a grudge is like locking yourself in a cell, hoping the other person feels trapped. Spoiler, they don't. You do. And regrets? They're tricky. They whisper, "You missed your chance. It's too late." But regret is only powerful when you let it paralyze you. The truth is, it's never too late to choose peace over poison. I remember a woman named Florence. She was 82 and hadn't spoken to her sister in over 30 years. When I asked her why, she gave me the reasons. Some valid, some less so. But mostly I saw fear. Fear of being rejected. Fear of opening old wounds. One afternoon she asked me, "What if I write her a letter just to say I miss her?" I told her, "Do it. Even if she never responds, you'll have freed yourself from the weight of silence." And she did. 2 weeks later, a reply came. Tears fell when she read it aloud to me. They were both sorry, they both missed each other. And in that one brave act, Florence didn't just regain her sister. She reclaimed a part of herself that had been buried under bitterness for decades. Forgiveness isn't about saying it didn't matter. It's about deciding it doesn't get to define you anymore. Because peace isn't found in the past, it's built in the present. And whether it's someone else you need to forgive or yourself, know this: you are allowed to put down the weight. You are allowed to begin again. And perhaps most importantly, you are never too old to be free. I once visited a patient, Joanne, who spoke with a kind of relentless urgency. She was bright, articulate, and full of stories. Her time as a teacher, her favorite childhood summers, the recipes she used to make for Sunday dinners. Each story came with detail, with pride, with feeling. But I noticed something else too. Her daughter, who visited regularly, rarely spoke more than a few words at a time. She'd sit, nodding, offering the occasional, "That's nice, Mom," but her eyes would drift toward the window or her phone. One day, after Joanne finished telling a long story about her high school reunion in the 60s, her daughter quietly said, "You know, I got promoted last week." Joanne blinked. "Oh? That's wonderful." But within seconds, she was back into another memory, this time about the first job she ever had. The moment passed. Afterward, I gently asked Joanne, "Do you know what your daughter does for work?" She paused. "Something with computers, I think." That moment struck me. Because here's the truth. When we only speak, when we're always the storyteller, the advisor, the one filling the silence, we leave no space for others to be heard. And when people don't feel heard, they slowly stop showing up. Not out of resentment, out of resignation. As we age, we carry so many experiences, so much wisdom. We want to share what we've learned, and that's a beautiful thing. But if we don't pause to ask, "And what about you?" Then what we think is connection becomes a monologue. And monologues, no matter how heartfelt, don't build relationship. Listening, truly listening, is an act of generosity. It says, I see you, I value you, your life matters to me too. Joanne began to change. Slowly, she started asking her daughter questions. At first they were small, how was your day, or what are you working on right now? But the change was profound. Her daughter began talking more, staying longer, even laughing again. And Joanne told me one afternoon with tears in her eyes, I didn't realize how much I'd missed in her life. Listening doesn't require expertise. It requires presence, patience, and a willingness to put our own stories aside for just long enough to say, tell me yours. Because often, that's all our loved ones are waiting for, a chance to feel seen. It still haunts me, an old patient of mine, a man named Peter. He was 76, sharp-witted, full of charm, the kind of man who made you laugh even in a waiting room. He had a history of high blood pressure, some chest tightness on and off, but he always brushed it off. It's just age, he'd say with a wave of his hand. I've felt worse and made it through. We urged him gently, then firmly, to come in for a full cardiac workup. He nodded, promised, but never showed. 3 weeks later I got the call. He'd passed in his sleep. Quietly, unexpectedly. A heart attack that could have been managed if we'd caught it in time. What struck me most wasn't the sadness, though that came in waves. It was the preventability, the silence before the storm, because our bodies do speak, but they rarely shout at first. They whisper, in small ways, a bit more fatigue, a new ache, lightheadedness that you blame on standing up too fast. We dismiss these things, telling ourselves it's normal, it's just aging, it'll pass. But sometimes and that's what I try to tell every patient now, especially those in later years. Don't ignore the whispers, because by the time your body starts yelling, it may be too late. Getting older doesn't mean surrendering your health. In fact, it's when vigilance becomes more important than ever. Prevention isn't just a medical word, it's an act of self-respect. You brush your teeth daily. Why? Because you want to preserve them. You check the locks on your doors at night. Why? Because you want to feel safe. So why ignore your own heartbeat, your breathing, your balance, your pain? Taking care of your health doesn't mean living in fear. It means living in freedom, the kind that comes from knowing you're doing what you can while you can. I've seen the difference. Patients who get regular checkups, who listen when something feels off, tend to live not just longer, but better. They stay mobile, independent, clear-minded. And more than that, they give their loved ones the gift of more time, more memories, more mornings together. Because when you care for your body, you're not just taking care of yourself. You're honoring everyone who loves you, everyone who wants you to be here. So if something has felt off lately, don't wait. Don't rationalize. Don't delay. Your life is worth the appointment. And in doing so, you reclaim the greatest power we have over aging, not to stop it, but to meet it with awareness, strength, and dignity. I often tell my patients, with a smile of course, laughter won't fix your blood pressure, but it just might fix your day. There's something sacred about laughter. Not the polite chuckle at a corny joke, but the kind that bubbles up from your chest and catches you off guard. The kind that reminds you you're still alive, still human, still capable of joy. But as we grow older, I've noticed many begin to forget how to laugh. Not because they don't want to, but because life begins to feel so serious. The days blur into routine, the losses accumulate, and somewhere along the way, joy becomes a luxury rather than a necessity. I remember a woman named Elsie, widowed, living alone, quiet and proper. Every time I visited, she was gracious, polite, but flat. One day I asked, "When was the last time you laughed until it hurt?" She paused and then said, "I honestly can't remember." That stayed with me, because laughter isn't just frivolous. It's medicine for the body, the mind, and especially the soul. Studies can measure its effects: reduced cortisol, boosted immunity, even better memory. But what they can't quite capture is how it changes the energy in a room, how it softens pain, how it brings people closer. So I made a suggestion. Pick one small thing this week that makes you smile. A funny film, a phone call with someone silly, even a memory that cracks you up. The next week she told me her granddaughter had shown her some ridiculous cat videos online. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my tea, she said, and I saw it color in her cheeks, light in her eyes. It doesn't take much. A favorite song, a silly dance in your kitchen, a board game with friends who cheat just a little. When we invite joy back in, even in the smallest doses, something shifts. We stop bracing for the worst and start noticing the beauty of now. Laughter connects. It heals. It reminds us that aging doesn't mean fading. It can mean feeling more fully than we ever dared before. So no, I can't write a prescription for laughter. But I can urge you to seek it, to create it, to share it. Not someday, not if everything else gets done, but now, because life may be unpredictable, but joy, that's something you can choose, again and again. And when you do, you'll find that even the heaviest years can become a little lighter, not because the burdens disappear, but because you remembered how to carry them with a smile. As I sit here, looking back on the many faces I've treated, the hands I've held, the stories I've heard, I'm reminded of one simple truth. Aging is not the enemy. Disconnection is. It's not the wrinkles or the slower steps that steal our joy. It's the habits that quietly close the door to laughter, to love, to being seen. But here's the good news. You can open that door again. It's never too late to listen more, to ask for help, to forgive, to laugh until your belly aches. It's never too late to choose curiosity over criticism, gratitude over grumbling, presence over regret. You may not control how many years you have left, but you do control how deeply you live them. So if something in this conversation stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Let it move you. Call someone. Let go of something. Put on your favorite shirt. Laugh out loud. Ask your grandchild about that game you never understood, because life doesn't stop being meaningful as we get older. If anything, it gets richer. And you, my friend, are still part of the story. So keep writing it, with grace, with courage, and with joy. I'm Dr. Richard Cocht, and I hope you never forget. It's not about staying young, it's about staying open.